All right, so today's session gonna be a little bit different. Just gonna basically run through a few bits and pieces that are gonna help some people out with sort of that rounded upper back, that sort of shoulder tightness, that pec tightness, and a bit of a weakness through the back muscles through the rhomboids and through the scapular position. So, right, there's no rocket science behind any of this. It's pretty much old school. It's been around for a long time. I used to practice, preach, and teach this kind of stuff over 15 years ago, in 2005, 2006, back when I worked in a prehabilitation training studio in Adelaide, Australia, in Caberton. And this wasn't Caberton, Fullerton. Yeah, I'm gonna cut this part out anyway. So back when I worked in there, there's a lot of stuff to do with the shoulders, the shoulder girdle, the whole shoulder area, all the joints and muscles that are connecting the shoulder girdle, the shoulder joint and bones together, but also the muscles that tend to pull on and around that shoulder as well. So the whole area as a whole, a big section of it. So I'm going to start off by saying these are specific to me and my shoulder injuries and shoulder issues. These are things that I've done in the past, the things that I've collected along the way. There's not too many. I tend to stick with the better ones that work best. So these are the ones I'm going to pass on. As I'm not, as you guys know, a fan of telling you what to do. I'm just documenting and showing you what I do. I will put this program and this little session together, leaning a little bit more towards my friend who I'm trying to help out with this. Now she has a front in front of her type of job. She's always working with her hands in front of her. So that tends to make us more rounded. That tends to make us the right shoulder, the dominant shoulder in her case, it does tend to make the position of the movements you do makes them a bit more rounded, sort of right arm dominant. So it ends up, I'm going to over exaggerate these positions and I'm not turning sideways a little bit so you guys can see, but it's like rounded shoulders, thoracic, and then rounded on top, and then they tend to work down as well, right? So up and down, so there's a little bit of this kind of stuff. If your upper body is going to be bent over this position a lot, then the lower body is going to be doing almost the opposite to try and compensate, sit you back up straight. The body wants to be vertical, right? Now, it doesn't mean it has to be perfectly straight and vertical, but it wants to be as balanced vertically as possible. So therefore, if anything forward, then there's going to be something else back. If there's going to be anything right, there's going to be something else left. Right, so you can see I'm over exaggerating these as I said earlier, but if my right shoulder is leaning forward, then my balance is forward, therefore my butt's going to lean back in order to keep compensation. So this is kind of how the body will work itself out. It'll figure its bits and pieces out like that. So the number one thing I think we can do, we can all learn from, is the good old dead hang. The dead hang is a very simple grip and let go. I'm not letting go of 100% of my weight here. I'm letting go of a little bit more, like sort of maybe 75, 80% on my grip. Because, well, first of all, too damn tall. So that would make it interesting. But the other one is I want to be able to hang on here and grip. The grip strength will be the first weakest link, the first chink in the chain. So the weakest link will be what we'll let go of first. At first, you won't want to be able to holding on for more than roughly that time, because your grip you're going to feel is going to give up on you. Now, I've mentioned this in my previous videos. You can get some straps that will help you hold on. And this is where I would recommend these straps, because these straps are now going to allow you to be able to get the grips involved, but don't let them be the reason why you have to let go, because you want to be able to put more of your body weight on and stretch out the shoulder, right? The whole shoulder. The lats are connected up the front here. The rhomboids, the traps, you got some of the rotation or tightnesses through maybe some of the rotated cuff muscles and the pecs, pec minor mostly, but you want to be able to hang and let your body just go. Just let it go. So if your grip is stopping you from being able to get to that time, which is probably about a minute, where the body starts to let go. I just felt mine let go there. So you want to be able to try and get to that sort of time zone. So having some grips to be able to hold on will be a magical investment in that sense there. So ideally, this is what you're trying to get into. This is what you want to try and do. So ideally, what we're trying to get into here is making sure that we get that hang to let go of the shoulder girdle, let everything go from here. This is an overextension of it from here. Then from there, what we're going to try and do is stretch out the front. So this is where this stretch comes in. I like to think of two versions of this. The version that I was talking about earlier is 90 degree at the elbow, and then bowing. This will take the pec minor, the smaller of the chest muscles, which is the one connected a bit more to the shoulder. Then the pec major, which is a supine grip, and then leaning both forward. All right, so that'll be the one that we're trying to get into. That one here. Big pec stretch, shoulder, chest, everything. My biceps even a little bit. Everyone's getting a stretch fairly evenly except for certain. We're good here. Big pec stretch. All right. So I'm not going to be doing these as an actual exercise. I'm just showing and running you guys through that. So after the hang, we do the pec stretch. After the pec stretch and the hang, we're going to get into the hip. Now the reason why the hip is important is because the hip flexor itself is in charge of connecting the hip joint to that lower back, so that upper body, once it starts to compensate from all the movements that we do on an everyday basis, then the reactionary muscles will be the ones that will try and put you back into balance or back into an alignment. Those reactionary muscles are going to come from the hip. So if you've got tight upper thoracic, upper shoulder, upper part of the spine, you're going to have, and more than likely, a tight hip flexor. Okay, so it's part of the pattern. This is how the body works. So stretching this helps a lot. I elevate the back leg up on something. I'm trying to squeeze the butt or the hip kind of close to it in that standard position. So as the standard position being what I sit myself in to start with, and I let this relax. Okay, just this stretch can get a lot of people. It gets me. I am quite tight in my quads, as I've mentioned before, with my knee injuries. So this gets me. So I'll sit here for about 20-30 seconds, let that sort of calm and relax. And once I've got that, the important part I'm trying to get to here, probably not well documented, but I'm going to try, is this part here, which is the hip flexor rotation. I'm not pushing my whole hip forward. I'm just tilting, rotating by doing a bit more of a pelvic sort of thrust, but just from the pelvis. That's the part I'm trying to get into. So that pelvic thrust there, and you'll find it'll catch again in that quadricep. And I would hold that for another sort of 30 to 45 seconds. So I want to go 30 or 45 seconds in that first basic position, then add that tightness, that tilt for the extra tightness, add that in there and hold that for about 30, 45 seconds. And once I can get that, if I can get that to relax, then I'll add even more to that. I won't be getting it today. A little bit tight in this position in general. And then obviously switching out and doing the other side from there. That'll be the majority of the basic stretches, is getting those guys to loosen up. The other two stretches that you could do are that pec minor one I talked about just quickly. If you watch the previous video, you'll see a bit more on that near the end of it. You can just skip to the end. You'll see me in this position. And that's more of a standing forward slightly for bowing. It's more of a bow than it is an actual push forward like we did in that previous first step. So hang, stretch, and stretch. These are the three main muscles I recommend that you stretch out, because they'll be the three biggest, tightest groupings and or muscles that are holding you from being able to posturally get back into a bit more of a better alignment. All right. Now, the other exercises that are going to come from that are going to be on the floor. I'll do those exercises just after, because there's a little bit more space needed and there's a bunch of people around. So what I'll do is I'll sort of skip a little bit in this position here to the exercise to do with the abdominal strengthening, and the hip strengthening. Okay, so we're going to be loosening some of these muscles, stretching out some of these muscles. And as we do that, we need to make sure that we then add the resistance training, the strengthening of it, right? So they're loose, and then they need to be tightened, but they need to be tightened in that muscular sense, not in that tension and or tightness from being able to be in the wrong position for too long. So this is a little bit of a skip, but we're going into a leg raise, and a leg raise comes from that hang position already. And you're trying to get essentially the tilt of pelvis. The tilt of the pelvis is the most important part. Most people just lift their hips like this and they keep their tilted pelvis back. So the back tilts back, the butt tilts back, and then they just lift the hip. That's not really using your hip flexor that much. That's probably using your iliopsoas a little bit more, which is not a good. So what you want is when you're hanging, the first thing you want to be able to do is get the shoulders to sort of relax a little bit, so you can relax a little bit more of that upper body, but then you want to get that tilt. You want to get that pelvic tilt to kick in. So the first part is that tilt. If you can get the tilt in, then you start raising the knees, okay? So tilt and knees. Tilt and knees. Tilt and knees. And once you're able to do the tilt, then the knees, then you try and connect those two together and stay in the tilt, just adding the knees. Hopefully that makes sense. At first, most people can't even do the actual connection of the mind to muscle around that hip, and they can't get that tilt. So if you need to, at some point, get started and you can't find yourself doing the tilt first, then at least add the tilt at the end, which will look like this. So knees, I'm gonna overextend back, but knees, but then tilt at the top, okay? Tilt at the top. I would prefer you tilted first, but if you can't do that, start the tilt at the end of the little knee raise, then your body will start to understand that tilt, your mind will start to recognize that movement, and once you get that, you should be able to control it more. Once you can control it, then you add the tilt first before the knees start to do their raising, okay? That'll be one of the better exercises to do when it comes to strengthening a little bit more of everything here, whilst adding that sort of hang, so the groups could be useful here as well. Now, once we get past that part of the training exercise of it, the six pack itself, which a lot of people do ask for advice on, I think it's pointless, okay? But there are a couple of exercises you can do that will incorporate the six pack. One is an isolation. I'll be showing you one isolation, which is called a butterfly sit-up. And the other one is it's just like a compound exercise. That's just using a lot of different exercise movements and muscles, but you have to utilize the six pack and the core, the whole center part of the core center. So once you start utilizing the core, then you can utilize the strength that you get inside of that six pack, so to speak, training, because you need to be able to put it into practical use. There's no point in having a six pack just for the photos, unless you're a fitness model or something like that. Everybody else has a six pack, which is a lot more. There's a lot more people with six packs than there are fitness models that have it just for the photos. Those people are utilizing that six pack in conjunction with everything else they're doing, whether it be fitness training, whether it be competitive sport, whether it be just a very active job. Their six pack is being used inside that whole movement that they're doing in everyday life, training, working, whatever it may be. So I'm trying to incorporate an exercise that has that in there. But I'm not trying to get too many exercises out here. There's going to be, like I said, there's 3 exercises for stretching, main 3, top 3, better 3, biggest 3. There's going to be 3 little working exercises. So the hanging knee raise, which we just talked about, the walkout, which I'm about to do now, and then the butterfly sit-up, which I'll do just after that. Those will be the main 3 exercises I would recommend to be able to keep some of the strength, keep some of that contribution to the overall health of your midsection and your core without hurting or contradicting the mobility work that we're trying to get to and the thoracic issue that we're talking about today. Then I'll get on the ground and I'll show you guys a couple of little exercises you can do simply for like sort of stretches and mobility, all right? So this is gonna be how it's gonna work out. So the next exercise, I'm just gonna tilt this camera, but the next exercise is called a walkout, okay? The walkout's pretty simple, pretty basic. I prefer that we actually do the legs relatively straight, and by soft straight, you're gonna see I mean the knees not being dead straight. So if I say leg straight, I always mean soft, okay? There's always a slight bend of the knee. I don't believe in this hyperextended knee bullshit. I'm not a fan of this at all, especially not under tension or weight. So a slight bend to the knees is still a straight leg to me, because a bent leg would be something more, you know, dramatically bent. So I'm gonna keep them relatively straight. All I'm doing is essentially just going down. I'm not gonna be able to keep an eye on the camera for this, I apologize, but I will be trying to make sure that you guys can still hear me and speak clearly. I'm going down my leg, so I'm going down my leg all the way to my toes, then I'm walking out. I'm keeping my feet in the same position. And once I get to here, you're in kind of like what they call a plank position. There's two options. If I'm doing an upper body workout, I'll be doing a push-up. If I'm doing a lower body or an ab session, I might be doing something like this. Then I'm walking back, keeping the toes in the same spot. And you can see here, level 1 is bend the knees on your way back, then come back up, hands to hips. The second harder option is to try and keep those legs at a relatively straight, slightly bent knee position on the way back in. So we'll look a bit like this. And then straight the legs. Okay. So those are the two options for that walkout. And you might be able to do a set of 10 or so. I've had them done, another variation. I've had them done where we go out. And then we bring the legs in, right? And then we would walk our way down the hall, walkouts. But I do mine on the spot. And I might add them with a push-up at the bottom, or might even do both. Might do a push-up at the bottom and a bit of an ab. Whatever those exercises are called, there's a million different names, but you know, I don't understand. I call them climbers, but whatever. And then from there, we can go into a butterfly sit-up. Now, butterfly sit-up, it's pretty basic. We butterfly the knees and we do a sit-up, all right? So no rocket science there. I don't have a very good butterfly, so I apologize for that. But the butterfly is not really that important. It's the sit-up in the butterfly position that's more important. I'm slightly more restricted than I normally am, just from this tight pants. So excuse that part. But essentially, it's just a sit-up, not a crunch, okay? The sit-up is going to be utilizing all of the muscles together. A sit-up, a crunch utilizes just a squeeze of the actual six-pack muscles themselves, if you can even get them to do that, because most people are in a duck bomb situation. So that doesn't really work out. But essentially, we go all the way down, put our hands on the ground, still all the way up, touch our toes, okay? Pretty simple. By moving the legs out into this wide butterfly position, we're taking out the hip flexor. Because if the leg is dead straight and we do these crunches, the hip flexor wants to pull on your upper body to help you get up, because it uses the weight of the leg as compensation when you get tired. Whereas when you open the legs out, you're going to, now obviously you need to open them a little bit more than what I'm doing right now. I can probably get another 3 or 4 inches lower typically. Just these pants are not going to allow me to do that today. Probably poor choice of attire for me this morning. But splitting the legs like that, opening the legs like that into that butterfly will allow you to utilize all of the six-pack muscles without too much of the hip flexor, and still keep a little bit of strength in that core and that torso without offending too much of the upper back on the opposite side there. So we've stretched out with those 3 stretches. We've added 3 exercises with the walkout, the hanging hip extension, knee raise, and this butterfly sit-up. So then the next 3 little exercises I'm going to add are more stretches and mobility based. The first one is going to be pretty simple. I'll show you guys that one right now. The other 2 exercises I'll do just after that. So the first one is a, let me do it this way. So essentially what I'm trying to do here is keep my legs soft, as I said before. I'm grabbing my toes,
keeping my knees bent, and then I'm just quickly locking that leg out straight. Quickly locking that leg out straight. Just going left side, right side, left side, right side, left side, right side. That's all I'm doing is that there.
That'll be the best ones. I'm doing about 35 to 40 each side on that. So sort of 75, 76, whatever you want to call it, up to around 80 or so. And I'm working my way up to that. When I first started, I was doing sets of about 15, 20. Only took about a week or so to be able to get up to about 30, 35, 40 on each leg. You can potentially, I wouldn't max out more than sort of 50 each leg, 100 total. Just a waste of time. You're better off doing 2 or 3 rounds, 2 or 3 sets of that. That stretch there will allow a lot more stretching of just not necessarily the hamstring, which is tight, and pulling on that hip, which is creating that hip torso issue we talked about earlier. But it's going to reduce some of that standing that we are doing a lot in the case of my friend, that is allowing you to be able to be bent over and do all that work that we do this way, this way, this way with our hands in front of us. That hamstring is kind of holding us, like it's pulling on us to keep us from falling over. So the hamstring is kind of actively on the whole time while you're standing there doing that. All right, so this one. Okay, this one here. I start with one hand behind my back with my palm up, and one hand above my head with my palm down. I straighten them and then rotate them the other way around. So this one will end up here, this one will end up here, then they come around and they switch up. Okay. A little bit tight in the shoulder here. Should have stretched out a bit more for that. Okay, this all makes sense. The palm is always facing down above the head and always up behind your back. So your arms are literally, your hands are literally doing opposites and then just switching as they go around. Switching. That rotation is done at that sort of 90-degree angle. That way you're getting rotation and you're getting that stretch out. You want to be pushing your most of your body weight on your sternum, on the breastplate, the piece of bone there that's in between the chest or the breasts. That's the part you want to be pushing onto the ground, so your chin and your head are off the ground. Squeeze your buttocks muscles, and then that way it keeps your body a bit more stable from balancing and falling all over the place. And the last exercise is very similar to the first one, in that we are moving and rotating, without rotating I should say, but we are moving the shoulders. We want the shoulders to be around 90 degrees. And then what we're trying to do is push up ahead and together until the thumbs touch, then coming back down. Now, you'll see with me, I'm quite tight, so I'm not able to do these past probably this position here. Anything further than that, and my hands are coming off the ground here. That's not ideally what we want. We don't want the hands coming off the ground that much. So if you can keep your hands about an inch off the ground all the way through, then you're doing a much better job than I am. I can make that look decent with my hands, but I'm sacrificing a little bit of that here, which is not something you should be doing. You should be keeping this relatively down and flat, okay? So that position there shows me my true tightness, which reaches around about here. Now, in saying that, these are called Supermans. I call them Supermans. In saying that, if I had done the actual stretches that we did and ran through prior, then I'd probably be stretched out enough that I'd be able to probably put a little bit more effort into that exercise and get more out of it. This is not the kind of exercise I think you can do if you're feeling tight and sore. So don't do that without at least what we would say, let's say warming up. But in the warm up, I'm talking about getting the stretches in and relaxing. So it's completely the opposite of the warm up. It's actually relaxing. But do those, then do these 3 exercises. Then you can finish off with the actual movement-based exercises, which would be that walkout, that butterfly sit-up, and maybe the hanging knee raise. You can finish with those exercises. Those ones will be the third last exercises that you do. These ones here, the stretches will be the mobility exercise will be second group. That's that hamstring, the supine here with the rotating hands, and the Superman. Those will be second group of 3. And the first group of 3 will be the hanging to get the shoulders out, the chest stretch with the arms out in a cage there, or you can do this in a doorway, up to you. And then that hip flexor stretch, the one where you kneel on one knee and pop your pelvis tilted forward. So that's pretty much it. Nice and quick, nice and simple. I hope this helps. Anybody that works in sort of like in the service industry that is always working, standing up and serving people in front of them and carrying plates and dishes and all these type of things in front of them are going to have a similar sort of situation as my friend has with the shoulder, the dominant shoulder. Now, in specific cases, sometimes you can get an event that happens in your life that creates a little bit of a compensation for your body to create this pattern, right? This firing pattern in the muscles, this compensation pattern. It's not always just from doing the work as a server or something that's going to create all of this problem in your life. Sometimes there can be an underlying issue that made it happen. And in some cases, this is true. And I recommend, regardless, that these exercises are going to help with the mobility, the stretching, the ability for the muscles to fire back in the correct firing pattern that they were supposed to be firing in first. This is going to help with that. Because a lot of the times, last little rant here, is if we have a group of muscles, let's call the muscles A, B, and C, are supposed to be using themselves, each other together to make a movement happen or whatever. If A, B, and C, out of those 3 muscles, B gets hurt in some other little accident or injury of some sort, then B has to be substituted by maybe, let's say, F, muscle F, because F is kind of like used to being able to use EFG movement, but F can kind of help out B because they're connected somehow. Then you'll get an exercise or you get a movement that's the first movement, which is going to be AFC instead of ABC, right? And that's fine, that's smart actually. Only if you can get B to rehab, come back to life, and you recreate the ABC muscle groupings that we wanted, and give F a fucking high five and say, cheers, bro, like, thanks for helping out, but go back to your standard. Because then when EFG is needed, F's gonna be tired and fatigued because F's been using B, been doing B's job. So now F might end up after some time getting a little bit sore and he might have to compensate and ask for muscle M. And that's essentially how the compensation patterns happen. And eventually, after some time, you got a whole grouping of muscles that are doing a whole grouping of exercises, that movements and everything that are not supposed to be doing what they're supposed to be doing. The body is smart and clever like that. I think it's freaking awesome. But prehabilitative exercises are going to help you not to be in rehabilitation, movement or exercises. So I always say prehab before rehab. And these type of exercises is prehab based, which is what I used to specialize in, like I said, 15 years ago, that prehab based stuff with athletes and high level executives who were doing a lot of the work in front of them, as I've spoken about just now. So essentially what I'm trying to say is work on these type of things, add them to your daily routine, weekly routine, gym routine, when you're bored, traveling routine, whatever, I don't care. Save this video and add it to a list of things so you have a little grouping or a little list on your YouTube channel there that has when I'm traveling or some whatever, you know. But I appreciate your guys' time. I would like and appreciate a little like, subscription, and share. If that's what you guys can do for me, that would be great. That's a great little payback. If you have any questions, just ask. I'm always happy to help. But yeah, these are essentially the 3 mobility exercises, 3 stretches, and 3 little movement-based things that you can do if you are suffering from a little bit more of that thoracic, rounded upper body and are having slight pain in the shoulder or your elbow or the base in the back of your neck / skull. These are normally the trigger points that are going to make you feel like something's not right there. So keep an eye on that. Massage will help a lot greatly. It doesn't have to be anything crazy or specific like sport massage into a specific area. just relaxing, getting rid of some of the tension and emptying out some of the glass that is more than likely overflowing in this case. So speak to you guys on the next one. Peace.